What we're going to start with today is a conversation about assembling portfolios. And I know not everyone here is on the design track. So Spencer is working on a thesis. Others probably will be working on a thesis. But I think this is good information to know anyway. It becomes relevant for you to find a job where you show off your work. It really is a great thing to have a portfolio, a professional portfolio. And so we're going to kind of go over just a few things, do an overview, just what portfolios are. I know for those of you in Jeff Batt's class, you've been working on the mechanics of actually creating them. So now we're going to talk about how do you fill them. And what's kind of the underpinning philosophy of how you fill them. We're going to talk about department requirements for this, for those of you who are on the master's degree design track, and then just logistics of how you get everything done. Is there anything else people would hope to talk about if we're going to talk about portfolios?
Would you mind just a couple of minutes talking about the personas?
That's what we're going to do when class starts.
Oh, okay.
When
so-
the others can join us.
So at
Oh,
3:30, yeah. So at 3:30, we're going to.
Oh, I mean, for Jeff's class, we're doing in the Captivate.
So my understanding of Jeff's requirements is you're just taking stuff from this class and packaging it together. And I don't know exactly how he's having it packaged together. So you have to ask Jeff if you have any questions about it.
Okay. He just said, just take information from your personas. And
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah, I can show you what I'm doing.
Okay, so in creative fields, you'll hear two things. You'll hear a portfolio and you'll hear a gallery, and they're not the same thing. So a gallery is an assemblage of essentially all your work, right? So you'll go to some people's websites, or they might even call it a portfolio. So Hiram Brown, when he came to our seminar a couple weeks ago, what he showed was probably more of a gallery, where we're just going to kind of catalog everything we have. So think of a museum gallery, right? We just want a collection of essentially everything that we have, maybe curated, maybe a story around it, but a portfolio is different. A portfolio is quality over quantity. And so the idea of a professional portfolio is we want to have a small number of really significant artifacts or projects that tell a story about you, your capabilities, your interests, your background, your experience, all of those things. If you put something in the portfolio, you're going to be judged by it, right? I mean, so you might as well, if for no other reason, put your strongest stuff there, because the people who see it don't necessarily know you and all of the wonderful talents you have. They just know what's in your portfolio. Some things that people say in creative fields, you're only as good as the worst piece of work you've done. Right? I mean, they say it, Tony, you've probably heard things like that, right? You're only as good as your last project is another thing people say sometimes. You know, the message there is what? What would you say the message that's being communicated through statements like that?
Stay current.
Stay current, yep. Get better. What else?
Everything has to be quality.
Yeah, I mean, if people are hiring you, they kind of want you to be able to perform, right? And it doesn't matter so much what you did a decade ago if you can't still do those kinds of things today. Is kind of essentially that message. So not a gallery, curated, small number of items. In portfolios, we tell a story. So it's not just a visual, or it's not just your thing, but there's commentary around it. And that commentary can be in multiple formats. It can and probably will include some verbal descriptions, but it should also include visual descriptions. It should include highlights that walk people through the artifact itself, if you can actually show off the actual project. You use all of the media tools available to you to tell a story. And what does that story talk about? Well, you know, every good story has an introduction, it has pain points, it has solutions, or it has beginnings, it has complications, it has resolutions, right? All of these things that you know from good storytelling should kind of be principles you're thinking about in your portfolio. You also shouldn't sterilize or sanitize what shows up in your portfolio, right? You don't want to talk about, look at all the wonderful work and there was never a single problem here. And isn't it amazing? And everyone loved it from the beginning. You want to, for more than one reason, you want to talk about the challenges you overcame. You're a hero, right? And so you want to illustrate how you overcame those challenges, like any good hero talks about overcoming their challenges. More than that, though, it's also just pretty easy to spot when people are painting a super rosy picture of the world and not addressing or uncovering any challenges. People who've been in the business for a while say they're hiding something. What are they hiding? And that's what they want to figure out, right? That's the story that they're going to start telling themselves. And if they're telling themselves the story that you don't necessarily want them to be telling, then you've lost control of the interview or the interaction, right? You want to be in control of the story. You want to have something so compelling that they can't wait to figure out what the resolution. You don't want them trying to figure out what story are you hiding. So some possibilities, you can talk about the background of the project. So got context, goals, constraints, timeline, the role that you played. What did you do? Who did you do it with? What did they do? You know, because so much of design is team-based work. How did you work together? You should show the journey. So a portfolio isn't just going to be the final artifact, but there will be earlier representations of the thing or things that got you to the thing. And that tells the story of your hero's journey, right? Here's where we began, and here's the challenges we overcame. We're showing you the challenges we overcame and not just talking about them. The results, always show the final product if possible. What were the anticipated results and what was achieved? If you can't show off the thing itself, show off artifacts, sketches, research, mock-ups, high quality photographs, high quality screenshots, high quality video, all of those things are possibilities. And some kind of reflection. What can you say about it that gives insight into you as a person and what you care about and why you care about it? So the stories you tell, you don't necessarily have to have one story for your portfolio. If you have, say, 4 or 5 projects in your portfolio, you could have 4 or 5 stories. And then each one is a story about a particular strength that you have. Or alternatively, yeah, you can use projects, weave them together to tell an overarching story about who you are and what your capabilities are as a professional. Comments, questions at this point? Hannah?
So with giving a viewer all of that like context and description,
Yeah.
about like how long or how much reading time should you give
Yeah.
to like each project itself?
I'm going to show you some examples in a couple of minutes. There's a few different ways to do it. I think you would want to try to blend media, right? So you're not just using words to tell the story. And you'll see that really well in one of the examples where there's captions and headlines, and then they're using visuals to actually illustrate the pieces themselves. It still is, I think, more true than not that people don't spend a lot of time reading online. And so the more you can do it visually or through interactions, through them doing things, I think the better off you are.
Okay.
Great question. What else? Any other questions? Okay. So this kind of goes along with the story, but you should be telling the story of your process as well. And by process in this context, I mean, how do you get things done? How does Hannah get things done? How does Tanner get things done, right? Not just the generic design process, but what, how do you engage? How do you develop empathy? How do you get a feel for the world that you're designing for? How did you frame the problem? How did you move from one piece of work to another? What options did you explore but did not select? How was your thinking shaped by research you did or critiques you received? What methods did you choose and why? So show your thought process, reveal it, right? Every good story shows rather than tells. I think most of you have probably heard that before. So you don't want to tell all the great things you did. You want to show it. You want to show the process, show the journey, show how you got from the beginning to the end. Use the highest quality representation you can, like I've already mentioned. Show it off. Like the point of the portfolio is to show off something really cool that you've done. Photos of research sessions in vibrant colors, full resolution screenshots. You can blow up and impressive parts of the screen. So sometimes we'll see students, they'll take a picture of the entire thing and everything's so small that we can't see any detail. And that might be great to get an overview, but what they don't do then is give us a zoomed in view of it, especially impressive pieces. So you want to do those kinds of anything you can do to show off high quality visual representations or audio representations. If there's a lot of audio, you can show off good sound design, show off the music or the sound that you used for some kind of effect. As I was preparing this, I talked to other people who kind of lead portfolio programs, and they emphasized what I've said, but they said, emphasize this again. So I'm going to emphasize it again. Most students have a hard time making things visual. Most students want to describe using words. So push yourself, demonstrate the widest variety of ways that you can view the world, and show off your ability to think through different media, think through different senses. Still good? Tanner, question?
I don't know if this question will make sense, but what might be an example of something that is so granular, so detailed that it would not have a place in the portfolio?
Yeah. So typically when students start to get too granular, what I see them doing is they're just describing events. First, this person did this, and then they came back the next day and they did this, and then they came back the next day and did this, right? And so it becomes a chronology rather than a story. Do you understand what I mean by the difference there? How would you describe the difference between a chronology versus a story?
I think chronology is giving an account sort of on a blow by blow.
Yeah.
These are everything that we did. I
Exactly.
don't want you to miss anything.
Yeah.
Versus a story highlights, as you've been saying, sort of key climax things.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah, things that advance the plot, right? That's what you should be thinking about. And the chronology is less important. And in fact, at times you may even put the chronology out of order a little bit, as long as you're upfront about it, kind of cluing people in that you're not necessarily following the chronological order. You can mess with time to give an effect.
That's helpful.
Kristen?
So like, would it be accurate to think about it like, so in a story, right? Stories are all about the conflict, right? We
Yeah.
don't have a conflict,
Mhm.
we don't have a story. So would that be appropriate to apply to a portfolio? Like when you're talking about a project, it's all about the conflict. It's all about how you approached and resolved problems. And if it doesn't have to do with the approach or resolution to a problem, then you just don't include it.
Great. Yeah, you got it. Absolutely. Yeah. It's you against the big evil world, right? And you were heroically fighting against these big giant problems. And what did you do to overcome them? Absolutely. What else? Any other comments or questions? Okay, so the site itself that you put your projects in is also part of your portfolio, right? So don't shortchange the actual container. And that doesn't mean you have to be super visually skilled, right? I mean, the things that you're learning in Jeff's class, that's the reason we moved, well, one of the reasons we moved to this Webflow tool that kind of allows you to drag things around. It enforces some basic good principles, right? Of titles, and certain styles, and headings being consistent. And I think it helps you align to a grid, right? And those, good principles. So if you don't have a great visual eye, and I don't, and I know a lot of people in this field tend not to, and that's okay, but make it clean and make it professional. And for those of you who remember the wild, wild west of the internet in the mid-90s, right? We don't want the under construction, the little animated GIF of the guy, doing the construction, and we don't want the little hamsters dancing all over the place. We don't want those things. We want it to be professional. We want At the same time, we want it to be elegant. We also want it to fade into the background, right? Because the site, the purpose of that is to get you to the projects. So you'll be judged to the extent that it either gets in the way of that or facilitates that end. Consider the flow. So from one page to the next, consider the usability of it, titles of links, headers on pages, titles of pages, consistency, active language, all of these things, active verbs, active sentence structure, anything that you can do to just make it feel professional. But yeah. Still doing good? Any questions? Tony?
Have people ever done kind of like video portfolios or included videos? in their
Yes.
portfolio?
Yeah. I'll show you a couple of examples here. What next? Okay, so portfolios stand alone for review, but they also allow you to tell a story in an interview. And so typically what we might think about is we might think about 3 stories that you're telling. One is kind of the quick takeaway for the person who just lands on the page for a minute based on title, caption, some significant images. Can they come away with a quick story, like a teaser, right? Just a 15-second message. And then if they spend some time with the page and read some things and maybe look at the order of things, does that tell a more detailed story? And then do you have something you can pull out of your pocket if you're talking to people about your portfolio? Where you can say, something I didn't put here, but I think is really interesting. Let me just tell you about this interaction that me and a team member had when we were working with a client on this particular piece and facing a huge challenge. And here's what we brought to the problem to overcome that challenge. So teaser, short highlight to the main point, descriptives that can stand alone, and then kind of the conversational, as well as asking or allowing people to ask, what do they want to know after they see your portfolio? What do they care about? And what would they be interested in hearing more about? So be prepared to talk, right? I mean, if you've got something in your portfolio, be prepared to talk about it. Don't just assume that it will all, it should stand on its own if you're not there, but if you are there, be able to tell more detail or add more insight to it. Okay, so with resumes and cover letters, what we always hear is customize them for the job, right? And a portfolio, that's probably not needed. And there's a few reasons why. One is most people just don't have the bench depth, the depth of bench to customize projects per job, right? Most people, even skilled professionals, probably have 3 or 4 or 5 strong things from the last 5 years. And we don't want to show the second string team just for the sake of making, slightly customized portfolios. That's one reason. Second reason, when you customize a cover letter, it's not going on the internet, right? It's going to some HR guy's inbox, and they're really the only ones who are going to see it. But if you've got 6 or 7 versions of your portfolio out there, guess what's going to be found when people Google your name? They're going to find like all 6 of those things and the differences between them. And is that the story that you want to be telling about yourself? And then the third reason is why not save the differences for the time that you have to converse with people? So have a conversation with them, and then you can highlight unique aspects of a particular project. Because of course you've done your research on the organization, and you can target the story that you tell in the conversation to things that organization cares about the most. Does that make sense? Any questions or pushback on that? Because sometimes people push back. They tend to push back on that one. Kind of flies against, a lot of HR wisdom.
Question.
Tony, yes.
So a lot of this goes hand in hand with the interview. Does IP&T provide any sort of like practice interviews, or is that kind of what the portfolio defense is?
Yeah, so the portfolio defense is a practice interview. And so your project advisors, you get towards the end of the program, hopefully will give you some advice on how to scope that presentation. And when we get to the logistics, I'll be talking about what makes for a good presentation. Occasionally, we'll bring in some interviewing things for seminars. it's certainly a thing that we could consider just in the balance of all the things we could do as a program. Interviewing
Right.
never has made it, to the top of the list of the priorities that we could be involved with. Although it's a very important skill. Anything else? So you're experts now in portfolios, right? You go home tonight, and your spouse or roommate, child, you can coach them through developing a portfolio. Okay, so just to remind you then of the expectations for the master's degree. When we talk about portfolio, we don't want students to forget that there's still a project component as well. It's smaller than what students have traditionally done. So as you go to the project archive, I don't know if any of you have done that yet, but we archive all the student projects. As you go and look at them and you think, wow, this is big. Yes, because students weren't doing any of the stuff on the right side of the screen. They were just doing this half of the screen. And so you can consider much smaller scope. The idea of the project is that something that you can complete and write up in about a semester, we hope. And then the portfolio, you're collecting projects throughout your program. But the actual then assembling it and telling the story about it and defending it in front of a jury takes place, in about a semester's worth of work, 3 credits for each, right? So that's about, say, 8 to 9 hours a week for your project, 8 to 9 hours a week for beefing up your portfolio over the course of a semester, a 15-week semester. So with the help of a project advisor, you prepare a project proposal, you complete the project, prepare the report, you submit it for grading and a self-evaluation. And then for the portfolio, again, a project advisor, and they likely will be the same person, but they don't have to be, but likely will be just because, that's usually the best way. You just form good relationships, tends to form good relationships with one faculty. You collect your artifacts and projects, you prepare the portfolio, you submit it for defense, complete a self-evaluation, and present it to a jury. The projects are graded by 3 faculty, your project advisor, and 2, and me, the department design project coordinator, and 1 other person. Faculty review the projects and have 2 weeks to complete their evaluation. And you get feedback based on what the faculty say. As long as your cumulative score across the 3 graders is a B- or better, you don't have to make any changes. You're not required to make any changes, but you would be required to make changes if you fall below that A- threshold. So this is just an example of the kinds of things that you would complete in a self-evaluation, right? So there'll be some questions about the effectiveness of your product, a 10-point Likert scale. So how well did you attend to the audience needs? Not at all 0, did awesome 10, right? That kind of thing. And then provide a 1 to 2 paragraph reflection about your responses, what factors led you to rate yourself as you did. So that's an example of the kind of self-evaluation you'll do. You'll take 15 minutes to do the self-evaluation, probably, or less. Enter.
I know they're working with us with Webflow and in the other class. Do you have any preference to the department what the final portfolio is?
No, we don't. We're hopefully, teaching Webflow as a convenience, but if you want to do it something else, feel free. Yeah. Stephanie?
I'm sorry if I missed this.
Is there what?
A PhD?
There is not. But there are project requirements for the PhD. And so the PhD process, there are 2 projects, and they are essentially equivalent to what the master's project is.
A design project for the portfolio?
Not right now. So right now, we want you to do the project and the extended write-up like you would for, for the master's degree. Any other questions? Hannah?
Just with the self-evaluation, so do we do that after everything is done, or is there a way just to see kind of what we're evaluating ourselves on beforehand so that we can?
Yeah, so the links are available in the handbook. So you can go see the link to the evaluation form there. You don't submit it until you submit the project or the portfolio. There's a self-evaluation for that as well. But you can, yeah, look up the criteria anytime you like. I'll show you the evaluation form for the portfolio before we finish up. Other questions?
So the PhD, that's not a separate track. Those are just like dual requirements. In a PhD, you do both projects and research.
So yeah, so the PhD has 2 projects and a dissertation.
Okay.
And you can do an evaluation project and a design project, or a design project and a research project. The only requirement of the PhD is you can't do 2 of the same kind of project. And then you do the culminating, research study at the end.
So an evaluation is still an option in the PhD? Like,
Yes.
because it's a master's now, that's not an option.
No, you can do an evaluation project still as a master's. It would be a master's evaluation project and a portfolio.
Okay. That
Um,
would fall within the design track?
um,
or the research track?
It's officially the design and evaluation track.
Oh, okay.
So we don't have a lot of students do it, so we just tend to shorthand it. Barbara, did you get my email about class starting at 3:30?
3:30?
Yeah,
Oh, that's an hour away.
so you're welcome to hang out and hear what we talk about in our program, or,
Great, thanks.
yeah. Better.
When does this project begin?
Yeah, so as soon as you finish this class,
Okay.
you can start your project. So you need to pass IP&T 564 with a B+ or better, I think. Or if you're going to do an evaluation project, you have to pass the evaluation class with a B+ or better. And then you're eligible to start your project at that point.
What is the evaluation class? What number is that?
660, there's 661 and 761. So both of them count.
So either,
Yeah, either of them count to, it's a prerequisite for evaluation project. Anna?
So just to clarify, so is it next semester that we work on our project proposal?
That would probably be the best time to start, I would think. Yeah, next semester, spring term. The earlier you get the proposal approved, the more time you have just to kind of work on the project. The problem that students tend to run into with the projects is they try to rush the proposal process so they can start working on the project, and they just kind of end up with lots more rounds of revisions than they need to on the proposal itself.
So we don't, like, we are supposed to have our proposal and everything submitted and approved before you register for the project credits.
We, so the only requirement is you can't register for more than 2 credits of 698, which is the project and portfolio credits. You can't register for more than 2 of those until your project proposal is in place. But other than that stipulation, when and how you register for them, just do it makes sense, right? I mean, you can save them all to the very last semester if that's best for you financially. Or you can spread them out. You can drop a credit hour or 2 throughout your program, or you can load them into a summer term, whatever you want to do, as long as that project proposal is in place before you do 2, or before you do more than 2.
You said no more than 2 credits until the proposal's approved.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Anna?
Is there like a page requirement for the proposal or like a certain?
Yeah, so the handbook has all of those requirements in it. We give guidance on about how many pages, but it will be somewhat dependent on the nature of the project. So the proposal, think about it, say in the neighborhood of 5 to 8 pages, I think. And then you can support it with some artifacts, right? So you can have some tables or personas or other things as an appendix to that. But we want that to be succinct. And then the final project write-up, again, you go look at some samples now, they're going to be hundreds of pages long, and that is way too much. And that is even way too much now. I don't know why students are doing that, because we don't require it at all. But we want them to say in the neighborhood of 30 pages at the end. Other questions? Okay, so just keep in mind that these things go hand in hand. We're focusing on portfolios because that's the new thing for our departments, but we're not eliminating the project idea. So portfolios, like I mentioned, you'll complete a self-evaluation of your portfolio. it will be juried, and by a jury, we mean that there are two faculty members plus someone from the outside. So an alumni of the program or a friend of the program, someone, that we think has some significant experience that we'd like to share with the students. Those people may or may not be local, right? So we may bring in someone from a distance for that outside expert. And we think we have the capacity for everyone who wants to graduate in the academic year. There will be 2 dates in fall and winter semesters and 1 date in a spring term. So 4 students per jury, 3 juries per day, 2 hours for each jury, right? So we can get 24 students in each semester, 60 students over the course of the year, which is 3/4 of the students in our program, which we think is more than enough. The jury format, you'll have a 10-minute student presentation and then 15 minutes for questions from the jury. Again, feedback will be provided to students, only changes though if you fall below that B- threshold. So some questions you may be thinking are, what if we aren't quite ready? Like, what if we're a week away from being able to submit our portfolio for defense? And honestly, the answer is you'll just have to do it the next semester, because we're relying on outside people and their time, right? And we're already doing like up to 12 students a day, and we just can't shortchange those other students, right? To squeeze even one more in could be logistically challenging. And so our encouragement to you is, if you want to graduate in a semester, in one of the semesters, let's say winter semester, shoot for the first date, and I'll show you a sample calendar in a few minutes. Shoot for the first date, right? And then if it doesn't work out, then you can fall back to the second one, but try to get on that first date, because I guarantee you everyone's going to be trying to push it up to the last minute if they can, everyone else. And so try to avoid that roadblock and that headache by doing the first one in a semester if you can. So where do the projects come from? Well, we'll have 3 categories. We have design knowledge and skill, we have development or production ability, and then the ability to apply instructional research and theory. Now, these aren't comprehensive. Like, we would be fine if you took projects from any class, or even not classes. I'll talk about that in a second. But these are just some good candidates for places, for classes where you could find artifacts if you're thinking, well, what the heck? I mean, theory is not my thing, research isn't my thing. Well, all of you are taking 520, right? And so that is a great opportunity to the projects that Heather does. Kristen, if I didn't say it, this will be available to students, so you don't have to take pictures of screens. So,
Okay, well, I did take one.
she's doing a picture. Yeah, oh, thank you. I feel so flattered. So there should be, across these things, you should be taking classes in all of these buckets already. And so there should be opportunities, and it may not finish. You may not, the thing that you do for Heather may not be complete, big enough or expansive enough to include it in the portfolio at the end of 520, but in that extra semester of work, you could round it, fill it out, let it grow up a little bit, mature, and then tell the story around it for your portfolio artifact. So you'll do 1 from each of these required categories, and then 2 others from any category that demonstrates areas of personal strength. So in the end, you should have, you should have 5 artifacts. So this is where it's going to get a little weird, so we'll spend some time clarifying this if we need to. You could have 3 projects, but 5 artifacts across the projects, right? So you could choose, for one project, you could do artifacts to show up your design skills and your development ability. You're showing 2 different categories, right? But it's the same project. That makes sense? The only thing that we'll ask is that you have, say, 2 or 3 projects, that you don't bank on 1 project for all 5 categories, right? So you'll want to show some depth and some strength across the categories, or some strength across projects, but 1 project could show off more than 1 category. Bobby?
So Like in 510,
Yeah.
we wrote a chapter for a book,
Uh-huh.
but it was a group project. So I put significant amount of work in it, but I probably, would I not use something like that if I'm one of several authors?
No, you can do group work. And in fact, it's in a lot of these classes, group work is the only option. So what you'll want to do is you'll want to be able to describe articulately what your contribution was and point to it. And so if you, and this is not Bobby, this is someone else. This is anti-Bobby, is a social loafer, right? So if you're the social loafer on a project, that's gonna be like the natural check and balance, right? Like you're not gonna be able to describe accurately and honestly what your contributions were. That sounds anything more than like, well, you know, I formatted it before we turned it in. Right. But group work is part of the game. And so part of your story probably, Bobby, would be not only here's what we produced, but here's how we work together to pull this thing off. Henry?
So when you say artifact, you're
Yeah.
okay with it being something like a book chapter or maybe like an evaluation report or write-up?
Yeah, so it depends on the purpose of it. So we'll talk about that in a second. So if it's meant for an external audience, almost certainly the answer is going to be yes. But if it's like an internal literature review that you were doing for your own purposes, probably not. Okay. But it should be something where you can talk about this was for an audience, for a purpose. We wanted to communicate these things or convince them of these things. And that, yes would be the answer in those kinds of cases. Any other questions? So they can come from coursework. They can come from your design or evaluation project. So you can pull segments out of the big project you did and count that for categories in your portfolio. It can come from your job. It can come from your internship. It can come from things you do for your ward, right? The stipulation is it just has to be time bound by your time in the master's program, right? So when you started and when you ended, it's just got to fall within that time frame. One more reminder: don't organize your portfolio by the artifacts, right? So even though we have categories like design knowledge and skill and production ability, we don't want to see headings in your portfolio called design knowledge and production ability. You know, what we want to see is we want to see like teaching math concepts or evaluating mobile apps, because that was the project. And then within the project, we just want it to be very obvious what those categories, how you're achieving the categories. And you could probably annotate them within the project name, right? So if evaluating mobile app is the title of your project, you can start by saying what this project does is it demonstrates my evaluation capacities, my ability to use research in the following ways. And here are the artifacts that show that off. Isaac.
So there's only 10 minutes to present. What should we focus more on? Like, because if we present like the entire project, evaluation project, for that class, I will take a role.
Yeah. So remember that the people evaluating your portfolio are doing a lot of independent review of it, right? So they're not coming into a blind. They will have before the jury will have spent significant time and done much of their evaluation already. Okay. So what you want to do is you want to come in and say, in this 10 minutes, I want to show you why I think this portfolio qualifies me for a job of my choosing. This portfolio shows that I am a skilled evaluator, able to become a manager of evaluation in a company. Let's look at this evaluation report. Let me point out these 2 or 3 factors. And now let's go over here and look at my ability. See, I'm also a designer. And so that helps me communicate design findings as part of the evaluation, as well as understand just design projects in general, which makes me a better evaluator of them, and so on. So it's got to be, yes, focused and targeted, and time limits are strictly enforced, because remember, there's likely 2 or 3 other students waiting for theirs, and we want to be fair to them. Other questions? Anna?
So just, will there be something that kind of shows I guess, like deadlines of when things should be done throughout each semester pertaining to our main project?
Yeah, so did you see it hasn't quite gone out yet. I think we're just putting the final touches on it. So yeah, so every semester or so, Dr. West, who's the graduate coordinator, sends out all the deadlines. And so that's still coming. We just got some final things from graduate studies, which is why, we're in October and you haven't quite seen it yet. But none of you are going to graduate in October, so you're fine.
I think I saw something like that.
Did it go out already?
Yeah, he said dates.
Okay, oh, that's right. He sent it, but we had to fix it because graduate studies changed some things. So the revised one is still coming out. Yeah.
So disregard the first one.
Disregard the first one. And I know you were planning to graduate
I
early,
was
but
planning on graduating by December.
I would be very impressed.
now remember when we say kind of artifacts that demonstrate your capacities in these categories or projects, we hope you'll take us on the journey, right? So if the final thing is a paper, maybe show us some of the background, how did you, Bobby, and you, your team wrestle with what should or shouldn't have been included? And here's some of the debates we had about why these were the 3 points. We could have included these other things. Actually, we drafted some language that could have gone in these other things, but we decided on these things for these reasons. Right? You can still tell the story in cases like that. I won't go through this in detail. Like I said, this is in the handbook already, and we'll make the presentation available. But what we want is the interactive storyline, its activity itself. We don't just want your documentation of the learning goals. Now, these things may be supporting things you include as well, but you have to go beyond the documentation and show us the activity as well, right? Don't just show us the storyboards. Of course, include the storyboards if you have storyboards. Show us the video. Don't just write a summary of a learning theory, right? Annotate a Canvas module that you designed that documents and explains the influences of learning or instructional theory on your work. Right, so just print out the module, right? And in some kind of PDF editor or something, annotate it, mark it up. Write captions and draw arrows and connect the dots and describe your use of theory in that way. And of course, you can put group projects in there as well. We just wanted to make sure that was one of the options. Just again, don't just put the entire app without identifying what you're responsible for. Talk about, show us what you're responsible for as well. There are no required tools. Use whatever you're most comfortable with. We are teaching Webflow. We think Webflow will be a good option for most students, but Tanner, if you want to do something else, go for it. And Jeff has produced videos. I'm sure he's given you those videos as part of your class, and those will persist and be made available for anyone in the program. I mean, they'll just last there for as long as he's associated with us and probably longer. Now here, we love our students in IP&T. We are so glad that you're part of our program. But you're guinea pigs, guys. I'm sorry, you're our guinea pigs. This is new to us, right? And so a year from now, we're going to have some great example portfolios to show the next cohort of students, right? And 2-ish years from now, your portfolios will probably be part of that. But we don't have them right now. And so we've got some things that we think will kind of help in the interim. And I'll show those, but I'm also going to communicate our intent is for you to be wildly successful. Okay. So since you are the guinea pig year when it comes to this, we are going to give you all the attention we can. We're going to be as flexible as we need to be. We're going to make sure that you have a good experience in our program. Okay. Please don't abuse our goodwill. We'll be good people, and you'll be good people in return, right? But we want you to have a good experience, and we know there's going to be unanswered questions, and we know that one of you is clever enough that you're going to figure out how to break the system, and we're just going to figure out how to cope with that, right? We're just going to figure out how to make that work, okay? So in lieu of showing example IP&T portfolios, what we have right now, and again, these links are going to be available to you, is, let's see if I can get them up. and turn around. So we have chosen a sample project from each of the three categories, or excuse me, a sample, yes, a project that part of that project exemplifies each of the three categories. Okay. And we'll make that available to you so you can see the kind of work that we would expect as the final component, right? Of course, again, knowing that there might be mock-ups or screenshots or storyboards or whatever else telling us the story. So we don't have that in this particular document. But we have the student artifact and how they wrote it up for their project. And again, because they wrote this up for a design project document, it may not be, you may want to do something more visual than this, but this gives you a flavor for the kinds of things you could say about it, okay? And so for design knowledge and ability, we have chosen, we may even see a cameo from Anna in this. I don't know, Anna, are you in this video from your sister?
I've done it before, but I don't remember if I'm in the video.
Oh, we're gonna have to watch an ad. I'm sorry, guys.
You booked a cozy Verbo mountain cabin with a kitchen where everyone can chef. But the thing they'll remember forever, watching the game together once again. The time for getting back together is now. Find it on Verbo.
On. Just go into my video.
And that's fine too. Yeah. And
A powerful earthquake has just hit the Wasatch Front. You and your friends are trapped in your parents' basement.
Turn on the flashlight, Leah! Turn on the flashlight! Oh my gosh, this is creepy.
the flag. You made it! Oh, did you see the notion? You got the right water?
We have it.
And then she also provided an instruction manual for setting it up. So that would be an alternative artifact that you could create if, you know, video isn't your thing. She showed off as well, you know, how do you, this is an instruction manual for the people who have to put this together, because the Disaster Discovery Center is this nonprofit in Salt Lake that's staffed primarily by volunteers, right? And so people aren't going to be setting up escape rooms all the time. So they need detailed instructions of how do you set this thing up. And so she just walks through everything. So that would be another thing you could show off in the project, along with, again, how did you get to that point? The research, the considerations, the personas, whatever, you know, decisions, how did she show off the decisions that she made? Okay, questions about this example? believe it or not, you guys are going to do this kind of cool stuff too before you're done in the program. Okay, I won't play this video, but for production ability, we showed one student's project was how to play video games. So he created a YouTube channel and created a handful of videos for different video games. This is Sushi Go. Card game people probably know it. Apparently it's really popular. So. And then for the ability to use research, we had a student who investigated a concept called universal design for learning. Does anyone know what that is? So essentially what this is we want to design things that have affordances for people with all abilities. And surprise, when we design for people with all abilities, it tends to be better for everybody, not just the people who have certain characteristics that aren't the same as the rest of us. And so she did all this research on UDL and distilled it into a training for TAs in IP&T 372, one of our undergraduate courses. And so this PowerPoint walks through all of the research she conducted on UDL. So she can demonstrate her depth of research, but then again, it's also for an external audience. It's not just a summary of her theory, but it was for a purpose. It was to teach TAs of these other students, what do they need to know so they can teach their undergraduate students these concepts. Okay.
So her project here, doing that research and creating the slides, is an equivalent project to the DDC on the side. And her artifact here is these slides, whereas the artifact of the DDC is the video.
Yeah, because a lot of work went to this.
Sure. I'm not saying to show that.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And then would you recommend annotating something like this?
You could, yeah, you could annotate it as well. Yeah, great creative thinking there about it. Yeah. What else? Any other questions?
I want this document.
Well, you're going to get a link to it real
Oh,
soon.
good.
Okay, so the next thing that we have then, the industrial design program at BYU, they're a good friend of our program. And they sent me their 2020 senior portfolios. And so if you scroll through this page, you'll see the students, their portfolio thesis, Instagram, LinkedIn. Not all of these things still work. Some students, they're just like everyone else, they turned it off as soon as they graduated back in April. But you can still click on, I'd say half or more of them still work, and I'll show you a couple here. Industrial design is a very visually oriented program and it's a very tactile program. They make things, right? So we're not expecting your portfolios to be of the same kinds of objects. But what these do is they do, I think, a pretty good job of walking through the story, how someone tells a story about themselves. So the first one, again, look for the structure, don't look for what it's about. So this was Danielle. Portfolio up in the top corner. So one of her projects for her senior thesis was a coffee table, right? So at the top, she has a picture of what the coffee table looked like at the end. And then she goes into, well, here was the brief that I was given. I was told I had to design and construct a piece of furniture following a plan and taught me several woodworking techniques. And there are other dimensions and conditions that she had to fulfill. So she starts by showing off some drawings that she did, some ideas for what the final coffee table could look like. She took pictures of herself working on it, right? Or not herself, but her process. And then she has a representation of the final project. I like this next one actually a little bit more. So this is Kyle Stevenson. So he worked on a portable self-contained ventilator for infants. And so look what he did. Boom, first big block of stuff, the need. And he just summarized it in a couple of sentences, 2 or 3 sentences here it looks like, right? Millions of infants face respiratory issues. They don't have advanced technology, and it's fatal to infants. That's all we need to know. requirements. Durable, intuitive, and accessible. And then he shows off the device and he shows it being used by a mother in a developing part of the world. And then he shows different features of it as well. What would you say about the two examples, either Danielle's or Kyle's examples here? Are the things that you find significant about them that you'd like to comment on?
I feel like you were talking about earlier, they do a good job of telling the story without always using words.
Yeah. Let's do Spencer and then Kristen.
For industrial design, when they're creating something like a physical object with their hands, I feel like it's a lot easier to show the process that you went through.
Yeah.
Like she shows like her in a woodworking shop and
Right.
you know, cutting and staining the wood,
Right.
whatever. But with design, a lot of that is like mental,
Right.
and it's hard to talk or like demonstrate or model like
Yeah.
your processes just through words only.
Yeah. So lots of pictures of you staring at a computer screen.
That's what I was intuitive. Anyway, I'm just,
Slideshow.
that's just the comparison I'm drawing is like,
Yeah.
how would we equally reflect?
Yeah, I think my response is don't overcorrect, right? When I say we want to include multiple modes of thinking, don't overcorrect and say no text at all. That's not the message. Right. So clearly you're doing a lot more conceptual kinds of things that aren't as tactile. And so it may require more words, but can you find ways maybe like that Kyle did? Infographic style or captions,
Pop-up captions.
pop-up captions, inverted pyramid writing style, right? So the most important things are in that first sentence or two, and then maybe you continue on with additional detail. That would be the principle. I want you to use these to gather principles and kind of philosophies rather than saying, oh, why it means I can't use any words at all. Danielle didn't have any words on hers. Well, no, that's not what it means. Kristen?
Well, I was just gonna say for me as somebody not in the program or necessarily in the field, I find the slightly more text on the second one to be helpful.
Yeah.
For me to understand the story and the flow of it.
I did too, honestly. Oh, I think I opened up something. Yeah, I think I agree with that.
But he doesn't have like big paragraph blocks of text, right?
Right.
But there's just
Yeah. I mean, this is definitely something that you could do, right? You could annotate a diagram. You could annotate your persona, Spencer, and talk about the research that went into it through annotations, through things like this, right? Anything else?
I just have a question, like thinking of putting the portfolio together.
Yeah.
It looks like really nice and clean like this to have each project in their own page.
Yeah.
I know that in Webflow, I think that you're only allowed 2 pages. Is that right in the free version?
I don't know.
yeah.
Is that true?
Unless you-
Okay.
yeah, unless you pay for it.
Okay.
Okay.
So I don't know if, like, would it be weird to have multiple projects on the same page or?
I don't think so. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Can you do like collapsible menus or collapsible sections on the page in Webflow?
I'm not sure.
You can do tabs. That'll like you click on the
Tabs
tab
on a
and it'll
page.
show you, and then you click on
Yeah.
another tab and it'll show you.
So that's new information to me, but we will, like I said, be flexible and figure out a way for everyone to be successful, even with constraints like that. Anything else? Okay. So we're getting close here. Oops. The end. It won't be pulls off the screen, isn't it?
Can we create a section on the IP&T website for student, like senior portfolios?
if the IP&T website was something that could be updated without getting like a dozen people involved, maybe.
Okay.
But it's
Understandable.
like even changing typos is a process that's more intense than we want it to be. Okay, so just some logistics. The front desk will determine and publish the jury schedules the first week of each semester. So you'll know right as each semester is beginning what the possibilities are. Work with your advisor to get feedback on your portfolio. Submit your portfolio self-evaluation at least 3 weeks before your desired date. The jury will have a week to kind of look it over and give you a go, no go, right? And then you are ready to present. And so what this would look like, let's just say winter 2022. So the submitting for jury number 1 is be February 11th, right? So these things tend to come up fast. Oh, and by the way, PhD students or people doing theses, dissertations or deadlines tend to come up fast in all of our programs. They just do because there's so many checks on the back end for these things. So the first jury, the submission date is February 11th. The jury itself is on March 4th, 3 weeks later. Or for round 2, March 18th. April 8th is the jury itself, and then that gives 2 weeks for any changes people need to make before graduation, which would be on the 21st and 22nd at the end of April. So that kind of layout give you a sense of how to plan. And when we say they'll be published the first week of every semester, I mean, that's like if we have to make any changes, because like we've been doing the graduation calendar. So right now we know June's. But we anticipate, I mean, we can see, once we hear what grad study says, we may adjust that by a few days here or there, just based on what grad study says semester by semester. But you can kind of anticipate. So knowing the 2021-2022 calendar, if you want to graduate in 2023 or 2024, you can kind of get a sense. It's not going to be too much off from these dates, just adjust for a Friday, how the calendar adjusts a little bit each year, but you can kind of imagine middle of February, middle of March is when your portfolios need to be ready to submit. Or say middle of October, middle of November, need to be ready to submit. And then the last thing I was going to show then is how do you submit these things? So Jesse has this calendaring system. If any of you have set up an appointment with Jesse, and one of them is the jury. We'll set the time zone to Mountain, right? And then you would just choose the date. You would choose the jury time itself. You'd fill out the form. You'd add a link to the portfolio, and then you'd complete it. And that's how you schedule, right? It's just kind of a self-service model. Yeah.
That would be for the submission deadline.
So it has to be in by that submission deadline, right? So yeah, so if the 22nd is the date, 3 weeks before would be the deadline. So about now, or last week, I guess. Okay, and then the self-evaluation is just a Google form. So your email, your name, and then you just do this 1 to 10 scale. Does your portfolio master show demonstration of disciplinary processes? Do the things you put in your portfolio achieve their purpose? Does it exemplify professionalism? Does a portfolio self-exemplify professionalism? And then reflection, right? And then the same thing on the other categories. How well did you justify the artifacts and projects you chose? Do they demonstrate your proficiency in design, production, research and theory, and areas of strength? And that's essentially it. That's the evaluation. And you guys are almost experts in this. We're almost done. Let's see what else we got. Any questions though about either of those processes?
I have a question. Sorry, I feel like I'm asking a lot.
You're fine.
So for like the jury dates, does that mean that we would have taken the portfolio credits the semester before?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Like I said, take the credits whenever it makes sense for you.
Okay.
But you don't have to be enrolled in portfolio credit when you defend your portfolio. Okay. So 10-minute presentation, telling a story. For a sample job you're qualified for, 15 minutes for questions. And we hope these are celebrations, right? I mean, yes, the jury is formally accepting your portfolio. Yes, your advisor's checking and, we're making sure that you're meeting qualifications, but if we're letting you defend, you're ready to defend, right? We don't anticipate, I mean, it's possible, like nothing's done till it's done, nothing's done till it's graded. So it's possible there may be some showstoppers that come up in the jury defense. But if we're letting you defend, it's because we think you're ready to celebrate your great work in the program. And so we hope you have fun and enjoy the experience. And it's something of a practice for, the real life that you're about ready to launch into. Any last questions or comments? Okay. Well, we are done. We have 20 minutes. You have 20 minutes to yourselves or so. We'll start right at 3:30. Pick up where we left off on last week. So thanks. Hope this was helpful for you.